Good morning, everyone. I'm Brad Baker here representing the Ontario Bat Network. For those of you who are not at the last talk, the Ontario Bat Network is a fledgling organization stemming from the second Ontario Bat meeting, which was hosted by the Toronto Zoo in March of 2020. The goal of our organization following that meeting was to ensure that a third Ontario Bat meeting was able to occur the following March. And then COVID happened, making in-person meetings impossible for much of the past year. This presentation series was a result as we decided that it's still important to make efforts to get current research and bat work out to the broader Ontario bat community. I'd like to kindly ask that everyone be respectful and keep their cameras off and microphones muted while Mr. Tune is presenting. If you would kindly post questions in chat, we will ensure that those questions get asked during the question period at the end. This presentation is being recorded, so keep an eye out on the board to see when it becomes available. I'd happily encourage everybody to share it beyond those currently present. We still have more presentations scheduled over the next month, so please pass the notice on to others who may be interested. Today's presenter is Mr. Dell Tune, who came to Canada from the UK after completing a zoology degree in London, England. He began working at the Toronto Region Conservation Authority in 2013, looking at birds, amphibians, and reptiles, but he's very excited to be joining us in studying bats. I'm truly curious to hear more about what the TRCA has been up to, so I will hand over the floor to Mr. Dell Tune.
And my talk today is going to be a brief outline on our bat monitoring work and how we're collecting this data in the region. So our goals are fairly simple for the time being. Before we started our monitoring work, we really didn't have a handle at all on what species occurred in the region. So our monitoring is intended to fill a knowledge gap of which bats we have in the region, where they are and when they're here. And knowing when they're here tells us whether those bats are potentially breeding in the region or passing through on migration. And we're hoping to incorporate our bat work into a long-term monitoring program that can provide us with trend data to guide management and conservation decisions to help protect their habitats. Excuse me, there we go. So our work with bats was kick-started in 2017 with a partnership between the TRCA and the Toronto Zoo Native Bat Conservation Program. I won't play this video, but it's a nice 2 to 3 minute video about our work with the zoo. And I think the link is being posted in the chat, but you can just type TRCA bats into YouTube, and I think it's the first one that comes up. So through this partnership, the Toronto Zoo bat ecologist, Toby Thorne, and his team were able to access TRCA-owned properties to conduct their research. And so they spurred us here to start our own work on TRCA land. Which makes sense because we own about 18,000 hectares of land spread throughout our 9 watersheds. And many of these areas are conservation lands, so these seem like logical places to begin searching. And so we've used a multi-pronged approach. Our primary source of data collection has come from using ultrasonic acoustic monitoring equipment, like those shown here. So the Anabat Swift bat meter shown on the left is known as a passive device, and it's secured to trees and left for weeks and months on end. And they can record the echoes or calls of bats as they pass within about 100 meters of the microphones. And we've been placing these on TRCA property where we think there's a high likelihood of bats to be, such as forest edges and clearings and near wetlands and ponds. And the Peterson on the right is a handheld microphone that can be connected to a bat recorder app on your cell phone. And we can set this to record when it hears a bat and then store those files that can later be analyzed, much like the Anabat. And this is an active device that we carry with us when we conduct our bird and amphibian surveys as part of our regular terrestrial inventory and monitoring work. And when we're at these various sites around dawn and dusk, we'll turn on these microphones and see what we record. And as we inventory lands on private properties with permission, of course, we can start to collect this data that is off of our lands as well. And so this is a map. It's not totally up to date, but it does show some of the locations where we've placed the passive devices and where we've used some of the handheld microphones during the past four seasons. So the Rouge watershed has been well surveyed by the zoo because they have a working partnership with Parks Canada. So we have a pretty good understanding of the species that are there. So we've mainly focused on the other areas of the jurisdiction. So we've been trying to get to as many sites as possible across the watersheds, but we're also trying to cover sites across that urban and rural gradient as well. So the next part of the process has been a big learning curve for us. But we're building the capacity to analyze the acoustic data in-house after guidance from the zoo. So when we take down the bat meters at the end of the season, we process all the sound files through software called Sonobat. And this program will auto-identify the call sequences to species. So we can do this because each species emits a unique echo signature, much like birds have unique songs. And this image on the screen shows the call sequence of a little brown myotis as it flew past the recorder. Well, the thing with bat calls is that many of the characteristics overlap between species. And also, to make it trickier, the variation within one animal can be greater than the variation between species, depending on what that animal's doing. So whether it's searching for food or catching the food, the prey, or communicating with other bats. So there's also a manual vetting process whereby biologists go back through a percentage of the files to check the accuracy. And we do this by looking at the calls, like on the screen, not by listening to them, because bat calls sound like indistinct clicks, but their calls appear as different shapes when viewed in software such as Sonobat. So as I noted earlier, each time a bat passes near to the device, their echo is recorded. The challenge with this is that trying to quantify the number of individuals is pretty much impossible. So you could have one little brown myotis, for instance, making like 20, 50, 100 passes, and each time being recorded, but you don't know, by analyzing the data, you don't know whether that's one bat or 10 bats. So right now, we just don't have the capacity to prove how many individuals there are by just using acoustic monitoring. So this map shows which species we've identified in our region and their distribution based on the data we've analyzed so far. So we're in the early stages of this yet. This is just the 2020 data. We're starting to look through the previous 3 years of data right now. And the size of each pie roughly indicates the amount of data we recorded at each site. And what we can glean from this is that big brown bat, shown in green, seem to be the most common species, or at least they have the most registrations, recordings. And it's being found in both the urban and rural areas. And that's no surprise, we expected that. Silver-haired bat, which is shown in blue on the other hand, is a species we had very little understanding of. But from our 2020 work, we found it's also present in both urban and rural areas. And also it's higher at a couple of the sites that we monitored, such as one along the waterfront and one in the upper reaches of the Humber. And then we have smaller representations of other species, such as hoary bat, eastern red, and little brown myotis. So the second approach that we've taken is looking at buildings on our properties. So we know that little browns and big browns will use these man-made structures as maternity roosts. Excuse me. And this photo shows evidence of a roost in the loft of one of our buildings. And you can see droppings, known as guano, scattered over the insulation there. And there are other telltale signs on the outside of buildings, such as dirty stains around holes where the grease on the bat's fur leaves smudges as they enter and exit. And so this building, we were able to confirm as a maternity roost for little brown myotis. So we had placed a bat meter in a forest that by chance was near to this building. And it was when we looked at the data, and at the time the analysis was done by Toby at the zoo, that it signaled that there was likely a maternity roost nearby. because the number of registrations of little browns was quite high, and they were detected just after sunset. And that suggested that they flew from nearby. So we went back, did a search of a few buildings in the area, and found that a couple in fact showed signs of use by bats, such as smudges around the holes that I mentioned earlier. So the following year we went back again and conducted an exit survey, and we were able to confirm that it was a maternity roost. So in 2020, we collected data using a mixture of recorder types at 17 sites and inspected 10 buildings for roosts. And we recorded over 20,000 bat call sequences, and over 8,000 of these pardon me, were identified to species by Sonobat. And through that, 5 of the 8 species native to the region were identified. And we found 3 new maternity roosts. So for 2021 and onwards, we'll repeat our work we did in 2020, but in a steadily increasing scale and with an improvement in our data analysis skills. And we'll continue our partnership with the zoo, and we'll continue monitoring our known maternity roosts in the region and incorporate the acoustic monitoring into our long-term monitoring program. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dell. So if anyone has any questions, I guess we can raise hands, or if you want to post in chat, then I can get those out there. If not, oh, we've got one question from Natalia. Go ahead, Natalia.
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation. The question that I had is if you have considered to use open source recorders that are like way more cheaper than the ones that you're using, and that you can like have many more and cover like a bigger area. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not. What are the open source recorders?
So there's at least one that I know and I've used, and it works pretty well, and it's called Audiomoth, and it was designed in the UK and it's produced there, and it's the price is about $60 per recorder, and they're getting better and better because they're improving their fireworms and like a lot of the technical difficulties that they had at the beginning. I think it's been already like at least 3 or 4 years that they've been out. So imagine it's like only $60 and you can have like many of them. And I've used them personally for bats, and they work. So yeah, I just wanted to know if you knew about this, and if not, I think this would be a great option for you guys to incorporate.
Okay, thanks. Well, I hadn't heard of those. Right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So if anyone else has questions for Dell here, we can carry on with those. Melissa Donnelly is asking, how big are the maternity colonies in the buildings you've been surveying?
Yeah, well, they varied. Not too large. With our the 3 new roosts, we found it's about a dozen animals in those roughly in each of those new roosts, and in the roost that I showed the photo of, I think that was about 20 animals, so not too large as they go.
Sorry, I should have let you ask that question, Melissa. Derek, do you want to pop on and ask yours?
Hi, sure. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Yep.
Okay, so asking if you also look at within night activity patterns with your detectors, and I put an example, like if your detector is right at a maternity room, to see a lot of activity right at dusk and dawn, whereas other places you might see most of the activity midway through the night, that sort of thing. So have you looked at that yet?
You know, we're trying to build to that because this is fairly new work for us. We're just starting to get a handle on analyzing the data. So we started looking at, you know, the amount of calls that are happening in that first hour after sunset, and just before dawn. But we haven't started to look at, for the different species that are more active later in the night, because I know some have different, multiple hunting periods through the night, and some just go hunting at dawn and dusk. So yeah, it's a work in progress right now, but it's for sure something that we'll start to look at.
Derek also asked if you're contributing to NABAT or NABAT, sorry, North American bat, NABAT.
NABAT. No, we're not at the moment.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm just asking these because I put a lot on those sites lately, and I think a lot of people are in NABAT because it's a real chore to fit that formatting requirement. But what I might say is that they have now incorporated what's called BAT AMP, the portal. On that one, it's not nearly as hard to post information, and it's really good for long-term data set because you're only posting like total passes per night. You're not posting the actual wave files or reformatting them or anything. And it seems to be a pretty good spot to put that sort of information. It's kind of like the iBird of the bat world. And I just might suggest that you have a look at it because it might be a good way to share some of the data and use it a little bit more. It looks like great data.
Okay.
Can you post that link in chat there, Derek?
Yeah, sure can.
Great. Thank you.
Dell, I had a question. Do you have anything out for the public, or are you interested in using the population, the public within TRCA lands to get more information on the location of roosts within the watershed for TRCA?
Not at the moment. I mean, if we do hear either staff or maybe other people like working on the properties, whether they see a large number of bats, we try our best to investigate that, and we'll put that in our plan of where we're setting up our bat meters for the season. But no, we don't have much public input right now.
All right. Are there any other questions? Excellent. Thank you, Dell. We appreciate everything that you've done here today. And again, this will be recorded and we'll be posting it as soon as we have a format set up to allow us to do so. The next meeting will be on April 20th. The next video will be on April the 20th. So if anyone is interested, keep watch on the board, and we'll get that information posted as soon as we can. And we'll look forward to seeing many more great presentations like Dell's here. Thank you very much again, Dell, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everyone.